Joining me now, our friend Miles Taylor, former Department of Homeland Security Chief of Staff, now founder of Defiance.org, and another friend, Hugo Lowell, Wired Magazine senior politics correspondent. Welcome to both of you. Miles, would Watergate seriously be just a 12-hour story in the news if it happened today?
Well, no and yes. This is the part where I might agree with J.D. Vance. In comparison to all of the things that Donald Trump is doing, it might only get a multi-day news story. And that's because Donald Trump as president, I say this with a straight face, has done things substantially more unconstitutional than even Watergate. And J.D. Vance's comment is a tacit admission of that. Here's the difference, though, Alex, is Richard Nixon tried to cover it up. Donald Trump and team on many of these actions that have been ruled by federal judges to be facially unconstitutional have not tried to cover it up. They've done it in the wide open. And that is brazen. It's scary for people who worry about the rule of law. But here's the thing. A lot of prosecutors who've worked in DOJ say that's going to make it easier for a Democratic Congress and a future administration to hold them accountable, as they've worn the lawlessness on their sleeves. So there's a double-edged sword to comments like that, Alex.
What's your reaction to all this, Hugo?
I think if Watergate was happening now, Trump would be in a kind of a dangerous position because of the feud that Trump has had with Senate Republicans in recent weeks. I mean, we saw him blow up the signing ceremony of the bipartisan housing bill, and that is the latest in a string of fights that he has had with Senate Republicans. And clearly there is a very public fraying tension between the president and Republicans in Congress. And, you know, I think as we get closer to the midterms and kind of Republicans see the writing on the wall that, you know, Trump's polling is in the tank and their polling is also going down, that there will be a divergence between Republicans, congressional Republicans and the president.
So I want to stay with this because Vance compared Nixon's fall to Trump's indictments and impeachments, blaming so-called deep state actors. And I want to play some of what Ty Cobb, former Trump White House counsel and now vociferous Trump critic, said. Here's that.
Comparing Nixon to Trump in terms of what they could be impeached for is like comparing a jaywalker with a serial killer. I mean, Trump's corruption, you know, let's just start, let's ante with the $1.8 billion that he and Blanche wanted to take from the American taxpayers to create the slush fund. You know, the $400 million Qatari plane, the $500 million from the UAE in exchange for our most sensitive trips, they invest in a Trump-run company. You've got the crypto issues, the coins from the White House, the watches, $750 million in recently reported stock trades.
Hey, Miles, by the way, we abbreviated Ty's list of things that could potentially be investigated there. But didn't Republicans in Congress play the biggest role in checking Nixon's illegal actions as president? And could the difference between Nixon and Trump be that today's Republicans seem unconcerned by Trump's business activities?
Yeah, and unlike Nixon, Alex, Donald Trump has had years to essentially purge disloyal party members who are willing to put the rule of law ahead of the ruler himself. Those people have largely been pushed out of the Republican Party. And now Donald Trump very much feels, Alex, like he has no constraints. Remember that interview he did in January with the New York Times, where he said that the only check on his power, these are his words, not mine, was his own conscience. That was the only limitation he felt like he has. And as a result, we have seen arguably the biggest sustained assault on the First Amendment in American history. We've seen the president go after senators who've spoken out against him, congressmen, states, universities, law firms, governors, former officials, foreign governments. The revenge targets have been enormous. And you know, more than anything, Alex, one of the data points that sticks out to me is government workers. When Trump came into office, according to the Partnership for Public Service, 75% of government workers said they felt comfortable sounding the alarm about illegal activity. 1 year later, only 25% of government workers feel comfortable doing that. That shows you how much his revenge campaign has had an impact.
Stunning stat there. I want to stay with you, Miles, with this first question about the new headlines, and it's about Maggie Haberman and Jonathan Swann's book, Regime Change, and it highlights Trump's plans for retribution, his fixation on ordering trees, maple trees, I think it was, at the start of the Iran war, situation room meetings to discuss Epstein files. And then you tweeted that when you worked in the first Trump White House, there was a rule that if a memo had a staple in it, it was too long for Trump to read, adding, quote, life or death decisions were cut to one page. How distracted is he in this second term? And given that, why might people in his orbit be willing to facilitate his life and death decisions?
Well, Alex, it kind of goes back to your previous question, because in the first term, the danger was a distracted Donald Trump, to the point that we could not go into the Oval Office on life or death issues without doing exactly as I said in that tweet, giving him pictures to tell the story, a couple of sentences. He couldn't digest a long document, which means he couldn't process the complexities of some of the challenges a president faces. Again, that was a Donald Trump problem in the first term. Now in the second term, this is a systemic whole of government problem, because he has culled the Republican Party to the place where many of them are very complicit in these distractions. They take on issues like the reflecting pool and the slush fund as if they are their own issues. So they are chasing Donald Trump's distractions around Washington. The challenge is orders of magnitude more serious than it was when I was in the first Trump administration for that reason. And it's one of the reasons, Alex, that we're going to produce a documentary about it this fall at defiance.org called Unfit 2, the hijacking of America for power and profit. This will be the sequel to the 2020 documentary Unfit, which millions of people watched. But again, there's a lot more that has happened in the first year of this administration than the entire first term of Trump. And it's important for voters to remember that before the midterms.
Wow, that should be mandatory viewing, that documentary forthcoming. I want to play some of what author Maggie Haberman said this week on The Moment with Katy Tur. Let's watch.
He says this is from a historian whose thesis is that Donald Trump is the most powerful person to ever walk the face of the earth, not president, person. More than, and then it goes down this list, Genghis Khan, Napoleon, the Caesars, Tamerlane, Hitler, Mao, Stalin. And he's reading this, and he's clearly, there's no moral component to it. He's not talking about who they were or what they did, just that they were powerful and remembered. The coda to this is that the historian was not a historian. It was Gary Player's former caddy and business associate.
Hugo, how do you interpret this?
Yeah, I just want to come back to one thing that Miles was saying. I think, a lot of it is the distraction, but a lot of this is also the fact that Trump has a very short attention span in his second term. And that is informed by what Maggie is saying, which is how he has such confidence in his abilities and this idea that he basically has limitless power. So he should be able to affect change in the way that he wants at the flick of a switch. And what we have seen with Iran, most notably, is that is just not the case. And I think there were certainly distractions when he's in the Situation Room talking about the Epstein crisis on the eve of the Iran war. And yet at the same time, it's also the case that he is now focusing on beautification and trying to clear the algae out of the reflecting pool and doing renovations around DC while the Iran war is still happening. And that is because he has lost interest and he has kind of lost patience with how long Iran is taking. You also saw it in other conflicts as well, right? You see it with the Russia-Ukraine conflict. You see it with a whole host of stuff. You see even on the Hill with Republicans. Republicans won't gut the filibuster. So he gets frustrated with that and is now pushing the Save America Act and saying, I'm going to hold my entire domestic agenda hostage until Republicans do this one thing for me. And when he cannot get done what he thinks he should be able to get done because he has this idea of limitless power, that is what frustrates him, and he feels the need to lash out and to tack to a different topic.
Hey, Hugo, quickly, I'm sure you've seen and read Regime Change. Is there something in that book that really sticks out to you?
Yeah, I mean, we also at Wired reported on his interactions with big tech titans, and so I will just talk about that aspect of it. It is fascinating to me the degree to which people like Jeff Bezos, the founder of Amazon, people like Zuckerberg, at Meta would suck up to Trump, would continue to suck up to Trump, and he would text him platitudes and selfies. And in the case of Zuckerberg, had his grade school aged child write a letter to Trump warning about how they look forward to the golden age of America, which was a line that Trump was repeating at campaign rallies. And what did Trump do to repay that platitude and that loyalty that he professes to love so much? Well, he was mocking them in his conversations with other people at Mar-a-Lago. And when Jeff Bezos tried to get that favor returned, when he was trying to get SpaceX to share some of the government contracts with Blue Origin, his space company, Trump turned around and just gave more access to Elon Musk. So it's a one-way street sometimes with the president.
100% loyalty and now apparently flattery as well. All right, thank you. Good to see you both, Miles and Hugo. Appreciate you.